Hey, folks.
Hello. I'll give it a couple minutes. All right, I think we can get started. Usual boilerplate. This is the GUAC maintenance meeting call. Call is being recorded, will be uploaded. Participation in the call is in compliance with LF antitrust policies, as well as OpenSSF and LF Code of Conduct. Awesome. I think let me open up this. The main topic for today is to discuss the schema and for Lijian to show us a little bit more data model. But besides that, do we have any other topics that we want to bring up and that we need resolution for today? Put it in by Ben and also Path.
Are you breaking up, Brendan? Is this me? Or
Uh, it's
Sorry?
been a little choppy.
I
Oh,
think you're
can you hear
breaking
me?
up a little bit. Yeah.
Oh. Hmm.
It's
Um,
better now. I want to make sure it's not my connection or yours or who's.
Maybe my mic. Let me talk louder.
No, no, it's your
I'm not.
connection. I think it's your video's pausing and all
It's my.
that.
Oh no.
It's better.
Uh,
It's better now though. So fine.
okay. I didn't do anything, so maybe talking louder made the Wi-Fi connection somehow better. I don't know. Uh, anyway, it seems like they are fairly small items. Let's go through this first, and then we can dive into the data model stuff. What do you-
Hmm. Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you want to start, Ben? I think the first
Yeah,
two
sure.
topics were yours.
Yep. Both these will be pretty quick. First thing I just wanted to check in on. I know there was a discussion a few weeks ago about some contributor ladder climbs. Were those sort of like suggestions, or do we want to, count those as approved? If we, I just want to make sure we can start getting the ball rolling on doing that, whichever way we need to go with those.
yeah, so I can talk to that. I've been following up on that. I've gotten, yeah, I think they're official, but we need folks to say they accept the position. Um, so Robbie has said yes. Nathan hasn't responded yet. Um, so let me ping Nathan again. Um, if not by the end of the week, I would say we'll just um do it for Robbie and Ben, and then we can wait until Nathan responds as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to get a quick check on, and we can talk about it more in Slack if we need to. But Datadog announced last week they've created a new tool called Supply Chain Firewall, which is basically a wrapper around PyPI and NPM, where it will basically check to make sure that you're not adding, pulling in a package you shouldn't. Right now, it has a check for vulnerabilities through OSV and also a check against Datadog's public list of known malicious packages, typo squatting, things like that. They have a pretty big Git repo for it. But I thought it'd be cool to have uh, they call it a verifier that basically queries GUAC and will also provide some blocking based on data from the GUAC graph. So I was thinking we would also, return OSV vulnerabilities just in case, the user isn't using the built-in OSV check. And then anything that's marked certify bad, obviously. I was thinking maybe in the future, if this is a thing that, you know, proves to be useful, we might also um, have a configuration where the user can specify certain license strings they don't want. But for the sort of first proof of concept pass, I think the only thing I could think of was the vulnerabilities. So basically, certify vuln and certify bad. Is there anything else that we think should be exposed in order to block these packages, or is this a good starting point?
So so are we integrating? So it's gonna talk to Guac to figure out what to block on? Or is that the way, or how is that
Yeah. So
work?
so basically, what I'm going to be working on is it's like a plugin for the supply chain firewall tool that will query
Hmm.
Guac
I see.
and get a list of things that from our so yeah, there's some amount of like here's our opinion of what Guac should reject on it. It's possible that we could have it. Obviously it's a Python script, so people can modify the query to do whatever they want, really.
Hmm.
But it's sort of out of the box, um, augmenting supply chain firewall with data from Guac.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those are good to start with. I think one thing when I was hearing this kind of reminds me of so we have this we have this system internally called Santa, which kind of does this firewall thing. I said it's more for binaries. But then
Mhm.
when you try and execute a binary that doesn't approve, it kind of gives you the report, blocks it. But I think what's interesting and something that we could do as GUAC to demonstrate this flow is what we have is usually when something is blocked, we generate kind of a request to tell people that they can upvote and like get another person to look at it to say like, oh yeah, this looks good. And I wonder whether that is something you can do in GUAC to say like, oh yeah, these things get um like someone gets sent the email and you either can get someone else to like approve this and certify good for you, and then you run it again and then it works. Um, but yeah, I think that was something that came to mind, which I feel like we're well positioned to do.
All right. Well, that's the only that's my two things sorted. So if we want to move on to the next topic, I'm happy with that.
Path, I think, yeah, next.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff, a lot of new features have come out. So should we just do another release for GUAC? There's new certifiers, new OCI collector, all that kind of stuff. You can do another release now that the workflow has been permissions have been fixed on it, so we can do a release. I think it's gonna require a minor version change, I mean, because I believe the CLI changed and there was some additions to the API, the GraphQL, where for the was it end of life? I forget exactly what it was for, but it was for one of those. It was a small addition. So are we good with that? All right. Okay. Sounds good. And then yeah, so the next thing was just like I know we're talking about the 2.0 or GUAC 2.0 and all that kind of stuff. So was there anything we need to close out for the 1.0 kind of stuff, like any remainder tasks that we want to kind of get it over the line? And at the same time, keep discussing the 2.0 and start planning all that stuff out. But was there anything else that we're missing? I believe the big one was the collector subscriber, right?
Yeah.
Which yeah, I know you were working on, Brendan. Uh,
Well, I was working on the depth.dev one, not the collector subscriber one.
right. I mean,
Oh yeah,
deprecating
okay.
deps.dev or deprecating the collector
Collector
subscriber,
subscriber. Yeah.
and then just
Yeah.
having the whatever functionality we needed from deps.dev captured.
Yeah, I think that's half done. Um, I think I just need to do a bit more plumbing. I think two PRs have been merged. Hopefully by the end of this month, should be able to close it out.
Was there anything else?
The other things about the interface, right? I think we did. I'm looking through the list that we have up top.
Yeah.
There are a few questions around the interface. What the interface is, whether the REST API is part of that. And I feel like that has changed since we talked about it because the notes that I'm seeing now is like the launch is the GraphQL and the REST API. But maybe after this discussion, maybe we just expose the end database, right? I think that was. I don't think we've made a decision on that yet, if I'm not wrong.
Which piece?
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Basically, the APIs for 1.0 that we wanna release, right? Like
Yeah.
what's the base that people want to talk to? I don't
Right.
think we settled on that yet. I think that is a longer discussion though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I think it could be simplified in the sense that if we are saying that we don't use the GraphQL, we don't wanna the REST API is, as we split into like the GUAC insights versus graph. If the CLIs and the REST APIs are not part of the 1.0, then it could be as simple as like the end database schema is the interface.
To provide the SQL directly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was one of the things, right? Expose it. Can we expose the backend, right? Bypass GraphQL. Yeah. Hmm.
Unless we want to say 1.0 is a GraphQL, but like we are moving to deprecate that, which is, I think,
In that case, it's probably better to expose out the SQL if that's kind of what we're trying to moving towards, right? Then like people can start at least working, they don't have to keep using GraphQL in that case then. I don't know.
yeah. The only thing about that is I feel like we need to, that we can't change the SQL, which is maybe another problem. Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think taking the current GUAC and getting rid of exposing the end SQL queries directly is a big change, and probably a lot of unknown work. Probably a 1.5 kind of thing. Like it would take a lot of effort to decide it. It's a finished and final product. So I would think that would detract from kind of the next generation, and maybe it would bridge the gap. Like maybe it's a good idea, but I would think it through a bit. I think we've put a lot of effort into the GraphQL ontology, and while we want to explore like what does it mean to not have that be the proof, the the core of GUAC, like it might be something we want to come back to in the future. So I would like to see the best version of the GraphQL ontology be GUAC 1.0. So yeah.
Yeah. I think I think I agree that it's like it's going to be a lot of a sizable amount of work that to decide on that, right? And it also feels a little bit bad to say like, oh, here's a 1.0, it's GraphQL, but it's not gonna be that. Like, don't get married to this 1.0 stable interface because of changing it. Yeah.
So I guess, oh, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
So on a separate note, I think one thing we should do is clean up the backends that are not functional. They'll be stored in Git history forever, but if they're completely non-functional, I think we should delete them, and then call like the ones that are there working and complete, and say this is a solution that's usable.
I guess my thing was, and this is like a thought. Does it make sense to do a 1.0 release then if we're planning on, radically changing it and its stability and all that kind of stuff? Or does it make more sense to like not have a 1.0, keep incrementing and kind of move toward that the 2.0 vision that we were talking about?
I think the 1.0, I would say, like, if I look at the current architecture and infrastructure that we have, I will confidently say that ingestion can be 1.0. But I don't know what that whether that helps. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, if we're a month, 6 weeks out from being 1.0 ready, it's probably worth it. If we're still 3 or 4 months out, then, maybe not. The other thing to keep in mind is, we don't know that we have a ton of users right now, and we probably don't have a lot. We certainly have some shadow users that pop up from time to time. But if we, from my perspective, if we ship a 1.0, we are kind of committing to providing at least some ongoing maintenance for, some amount of time, and then potentially an upgrade path. So, that's probably a consideration for us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, the question I have is, what are we trying to tell people with a 1.0? Like, what is the point of saying, hey, we are 1.0? Is it to tell folks that, yep, the API is solid, and yeah, you're going to expect a certain level of support and whatever? Is it to inform the community, no, we think GUAC is ready for prime time and production use? Like, what is, I think it's probably worthwhile to say, like, what are we trying to say with that 1.0 release? Because I think regardless of everything else, all the things that folks were mentioning were probably all things we should be doing. Like Jeff saying, hey, we should remove the old unused backends and some of the other things. Yeah, I think we should. Anyway, Mark.
I was gonna just say something like that, how I don't think we want to go like announce, like with a 1.0 release, we would want to do a good amount of publicize it and create awareness. And I'm not sure if we want to do that with a caveat on everything we say, saying but don't get like too
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
depend on it too much, because in a couple of months everything is going to change. But maybe like as Michael said, the intention isn't like to say you can use this in production. Maybe I don't know, it's a different goal.
I just want to put a time check. Since we have Dajan here, I want to make sure we can cover this stuff. It sounds like at least the follow-up for this is to have a discussion on what we want out of the 1.0 and then make a decision around that. Let's put that as a discussion point for next week. Cool. So I think Dajan, all yours. Go for it.
Thanks. So yeah, I said, like, no rush for these things. I don't think we're gonna solve everything, in a couple of more meetings for 2.0 as well. So I guess, like, it's just kicking off discussion, and I think it makes sense. Like, what's 1.0, what's 2.0, it's all the same conversation to me. So yeah, so let's continue a little bit from what we did last week. I'm not super prepared, so bear with me. I can share the screen if it's okay with everyone. So last week I only showed a little bit of UI with a couple of examples. We don't have super advanced documentation, of course, right, at the moment. So I will mostly walk you through of how things work at the moment, and we can look at some design documents, if that's okay with everyone. So please feel free to jump in anytime and like steer the discussion in a proper way. So, maybe give you a little bit more of where we are at the moment, and then we can see what's interesting to discuss next week, and I can prepare more things around it, right? So, as I said, in lack of architectural diagram, I will walk you through what's going on. So we implemented everything as a single application, single Rust process that basically depends only on two external dependencies. One is the Postgres database, and the other one is optional OIDC provider, right? But even those two are optional for simple demo purposes. We created something called PM mode, project manager mode, because for the version 1 that we had, it was impossible for them to work on. So if you just get any release binary, and run it, or run the source with the default parameters, it will start the PM mode. So it will basically run embedded Postgres into the process, and disabled all authentication, right? So it will be easy to get started. So let me share you quickly something else. This is my basically dev environment, and here what I'm doing is actually running a compose with just a Postgres database, and then starting things with a little bit more stuff. Let me see if my terminal will act up. Can everybody see this? So it's a similar thing. Like you start the binary, point it to a database of your own, run in the dev mode, so that all database migrations will be run, and also disable authentication. So I'll run this. Go back to the browser. As I said, I'm not super prepared, but bear with me. And we will get something similar that I showed you last time, right? So if you go to the Open API, maybe we can start with the APIs and then go from there. So the main things are, so everything revolves around, at the moment, around SBOMs and vulnerabilities. So that's one of the things where I think, comparing to the GUAC, there's a lot of things to be done, because there's nothing about salsas and scorecards and any other entities, right? It's all to be done, right? So starting with the SBOM, there's a typical just a single CRUD APIs. So you can upload an SBOM, get an SBOM, and delete stuff. Similarly, is with where do I go further with this? Importers, the similar thing that we talked last time. We will basically get you start with the importers, right? So how we are testing things in a simple way is you would basically create a simple data set, a list of SBOMs and a couple of advisories. So for example, we work with CSAF, but I would this week maybe create some examples with the OSV as well. And then in a one single command, upload that zip file as like a data set you want to use, that will get you something like this, right? So basic CVs, advisories, and SBOMs.
It's a good question. Is the zip file just like the passed out information, or is that the raw SBOMs and
Raw SBOMs, yeah.
Okay.
So if we go here, it's a very similar to the GUAC dataset that it was at the time there. So basically, if you take a look, it's a couple of SPDX files, CSV file, just zip everything and ship it to the API to get it imported, right? Where were I? So that's basically the basic the basic architecture. I wouldn't bother with other stuff. Mhm.
Question on, so how did you, I think last time we talked about this, like you were doing, you're copying over the OSV database in order to do vulnerability scans and stuff? Where does that happen then?
Yeah, so that's something we are playing with a little bit more.
Okay.
It's basically, yeah, one thing would be to copy the whole CV database and import it. The idea is that like different people would be interested into different ecosystems, right? So for example, if you're a Java shop, you just want to have like a Maven and maybe Node stuff. You don't care about Go vulnerabilities and things like that. So the idea is that you can go through to individual sources and then just at the moment we have implemented only like going through the Git and get those sources from the Git. I tested today importing the GitHub OSV database. It takes a while, but it gets there. And I know that Google have that bucket with a complete database that can also be implemented to import everything from there, but we still didn't do that.
So if you don't mind me asking, so these are kind of like, it's more, the collection is more like an rsync action, and then they're kind of like static databases. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to think about it.
So we have at the moment figure out two things. So one is the Git, right? So this important will run periodically. So if all the list of advisories are maintained into Git, you will every time pull again and import all the new stuff. The other thing is what Red Hat traditionally used were those CSAF repositories, which are kind of have a similar functionality with their index and things like that. So you would be able to query the file and query and get the new stuff all the time that's coming into that repository. I know the Bob did some stuff with the clearly defined, which is also hosted in the bucket, but I'm not sure how it's the same thing. So the first time you run, you will get everything that's already there, and then periodically you will ask for updates, right? Git is easy. Everything else should have some mechanism to say like, okay, this is the new stuff, right? Since you last queried.
So whenever there's something, like if there's update to some, let's say there's an update to, okay, so maybe keep it simple. If there's a new CVE, that it will download a new file and put it in that bucket. And then if there's an update to a CVE, it will create a new file, or is it gonna update existing file?
I guess it depends on the repository. I don't I really don't know. Yeah, how the CV project. So yeah,
Yeah, I just want
I'm not
to
sure really.
so I think what's going through my mind is I kind of like this like file-based um index/keying, right? I think it makes the interface very clean. And then it kind of, I'm thinking about it in terms of like, oh, you have a bunch of files, and then you have something that translates it to the schema, and then it may result in a bunch of files, right? And so then you can kind of do this independently.
Well, if you take a look how this works for these repositories, so there's a CV projects, and there's a couple of these OSV sources. If you let me try to find it. My only concern with this, so I'm only started looking at this. So this is GitHub security advisory database, right? And it's just a Git repository. All advisories are in the advisory stuff, and then you just have a bunch of files, a bunch of files in the OSV format, basically, right? So you clone the directory, you import it, and then you periodically pull and get all the new files or the changes to existing files and ingest, right? The only trouble I see with this is that yeah, it can take a while to get all this information at the first time into a database, right? Because there's a lot of it, and you basically are cloning the OSV database locally, right? I can see where the using service have benefit and where this kind of approach have benefit, right? Like if you don't wanna, as we talked the last time, like if you just wanna spin some process and analyze bunch of S bombs, you don't want to have the whole world in your database, right? But if you wanna host something and provide a good SLA without depending on the external APIs, then approach like this makes sense, right? So even if it's coming from us, I'm not 100% sure that this is the right solution for all for all use cases, but the use case that we are going to try to solve, I guess it makes sense. To me, is also is, I don't know. As I said, like this is all work in progress, right? To me, it makes sense to at some point you have like a snapshot of your database and start with there, and then just pull things over, because depending on what you wanna have covered in your system, it might be a huge database, right? If you wanna cover everything. So we are currently discussing all this, and I will let you know where we're going with this. But any ideas you have around it, yeah, let me know. Part you have.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong then. So you're taking this OSV data and then you're
Just
parsing it out, parsing it into
yeah.
the database itself?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So once you get there, you have a bunch of CVEs and bunch of advisories directly in the database that you can then query.
I see. Is that required? I mean, because you're just, I see, because you want to make everything one service, then it's required to put everything into that one database.
Well, it's a similar thing, like it's a similar functionality. What we will, so like GUAC, we would ingest SBOM, right? We will get all the packages. For these packages, we would query OSV service, and we will ingest that into the database as well, right? It's the same thing, right? So these CVs and This is just
thought
not
you were-
going through the service. This is going through the data source directly.
So how is it querying the data source? I guess that's what I'm getting confused by. Because it's coming in as JSON, right? So you create an index out of it, and then you just query.
It's coming as a JSON. It's parsed and it's stored into a database.
Okay.
So imagine 35x and 35 vulnerability kind of things going into a database, but not only for the packages that are in the SBOM. This is just ingest the whole world
Everything.
into the database.
Right, that's what I mean. Isn't that too much information then? Like I
Could be.
see, yeah.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
I think it's your sorry, I know Marco, I know. I think I feel like you're just passing. This is like the vulnerability metadata, but not the linkage. So it's not that bad because you're not actually like creating the relationships, right?
It's creating all. Yeah, we can go through the schema later on, but as I said, like this is all optional. We still need to figure out how to like create these unified views on the world. So you don't have to import everything if you don't need it. But you can, right? That's I think is the point.
Sorry, Marco.
No, all good. My question I think was related to that. So does this resolve the relationships between entities, like say packages, SBOMs, vulnerabilities, when on ingestion, or on consumption when the queries are issued?
It depends. So for SBOMs, I think it's a clear case. So you have an SBOM, you parse it, you get packages, and you basically have your packages resolved for each SBOM, right? For vulnerabilities, it can be a little bit more complex. So this is where we had issues with the version 1 and with GUAC as well, and try to do some things as well. So what we do when you parse advisory, basically in advisory, you get list of packages. You can get list of packages that are vulnerable, and that's okay. So you store that in a database, and that's easy to find. What can be then problematic to find is, find me the SBOMs that are then affected by this. So this is all purely query based, right? So we don't do that. It would be query like.
I guess another aspect of resolving it is the format in the advisory. It might not, like the format of the identifier might not be in the same format
Exactly.
as the SBOM. So is that done on the like that would be done on the query side there?
Yes. So what we done? So for example, what we talked about last time as well. So like advisory can say there's a Vim in rel that might be affected, right? So how we did that in GUAC in version 1 is that we would actually on ingestion side try to find these Vims, pearls and attach 35x and 35 vulnerability stuff, which is a problem because then you are depending basically on the order of how you ingest stuff, and if you ingest SBOM later on, how do you do that correlation later on? So what we did here is that we can, if you have a Perl, that's easy, right? We can connect package to the advisory statement and correlate all that. If the identifier is not there, you have just a name or something like that, we just store that in the database. And I think it makes sense to don't be smart on ingestion because, okay, we stored in a database what's in the file, right? That's it. This is the advisory. And then the logic how we get from this advisory to actually what's vulnerable of packages and bombs in the database, that's kind of a query logic, right? Later on. So for example, you could go and then find all Vim packages in all bombs that have a certain CPE that matches and try to find it. That's what we are doing at the moment as a logic, yeah.
That makes sense, and that's definitely, this model is better supported by importing the entire vulnerability source, say, because then if you weren't doing that, then you wouldn't be able to do it on resolve the relationships when querying. That makes sense.
Yeah, I want to point out that I think this is exactly the same problem that we had also, and like resolution against like the information that's provided in the CV report and the advisory isn't like something you may not be able to easily encode within like a SQL statement, right? It's like sometimes you have to expand out, like go to the source and expand out like a commit ID or something like that, or like doing the fuzzy matching with the CPEs. I think that's why we ended up with like that the certifier kind of like going in trying to do those things. But it sounds like we ran into the same issue there.
So where to go next? So I can show you a couple of design documents that we have. For example, for how the SBOMs are stored. Maybe that can be helpful. So, and you're in this topic deeply, so you can tell if it makes sense or doesn't, right? So the first node is the SBOM node containing just a basic metadata, right? The creates an ID and the document.
Can you make it like one bigger? Thank you.
And I will try to explain this because I didn't design this. So bear with me if something that doesn't make sense, right? So then there are the packages of SBOM, and each package has its own node. It's how the package is defined, and we have different relationships between the packages. So this is basically the basis for the graph, right? So this node basically describes the SBOM, and then the relationship what's contained with what is defined by these two tables, right? And then each package can have different identifiers. So you can have from it can be a Perl or a CPE in most of the cases. And the CPE is also divided in three different tables, going from like a base Perl, saying but just a type name and namespace, and then this base Perl can have multiple versions. And all these versions can have also different qualifiers. Does that make sense? Let me prepare this maybe a little bit better for the
I think
the next week.
Yeah,
with some examples.
I think I'm like, for me, I'm struggling a little bit with the. I'm guessing I'm reading this as a UML diagram, right? Like
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me prepare this a little bit.
So I think, at least for me, I don't know about others, but I feel like if you have just like the database schema. Yeah, I think that we could also work with that.
Yeah. I will prepare that. We are coming to the hour as well today. I will try to prepare the database schema, and then we can go to different entities there. Maybe one thing I can show you. So this is not showed in the diagram at the moment, but maybe because it's still probably too early. And this is something we talked about around correlating different advisories to different, say, products. So when we ingesting an SBOM, that SBOM define a different product version, basically. And the product is basically an entity trying to group different product versions. So, and even this will change. So you have a product like let's call rel, right? Rel, and then you have different product versions and product streams, what they call it, like rel 7, rel 8, rel 9, and then you will have a different releases. So one SBOM is basically describing a single product version, right? And so instead of just listing all the SBOMs, this will be the grouping, I think, in the future. So you as an organization define all your products, and right now we can parse this from the SBOMs. Like if you find, and it's usually done on the CP identifiers. So like if you see a similar CP, so similar organization and the product, you will put that into a database, and then you can find, like, give me all SBOMs from Red Hat or from Google, give me all rel SBOMs, right? And then all the versions and version ranges that we can find later on. And that's another thing, is that at least the CSAP advisories that we worked with from historical Red Hat data, they usually talk about also product ranges, right? So saying this advisory basically, basically affects rel 7 and package name Vim. One of the examples. So this is kind of a database schema that would. This is also out of date. I'm sorry for being this confusing, but we are in the middle of development, so I don't have that much good documents to go by. But the idea would be that from the SBOMs you can get products and product versions and link SBOMs to different product versions, and from the advisory documents you can then link. They will have a similar links to those products, but maybe sometimes not talk about product version directly, but the product version range, saying like everything between version 2 and version 3 is affected. So we need to store that somehow to be able to write those queries later on to say, like, okay, give me all the SBOMs that are in the product version range 2 and 3, and then we know that these might be affected, and we will try to find the exact packages you're talking about. I will stop here for now because I think I confused you enough. So
I think if I think my interpretation is, like, it seems like there are kind of some things that are like raw data, and then some of the relationships which are association data, or like cache data. I think like product status sounds like a evaluation of products against advisories, right?
yeah.
And so like that may be, I think I'm trying to imagine what the data pipeline is, right? Because you're translating the databases, and then you're doing like a second step evaluation to fill in those relationships.
No,
Not.
I think
Yeah.
no. So these are all relationships coming from advisories, right? They're just not based on the pro. So when everything has pro, life is easy, right? You can easily correlate, find the pros and what SBOMs they be. But the problem is with advisories that are vague, right? That says, and they're usually using these, CPs as identifying the products, and then mentioning things, even the components within the products or packages are just referred by a name. So that's where we traditionally struggle to actually figure out what's affected, right? And I think things will get better with better data, but still I don't know. We can imagine the ideal world with everything being.
Yeah, I just ping Santiago because he was looking at this identifier problem, right? Because it's a weird interaction. I think you mentioned before, right? Based on the data that you ingest coming in which order, you may have some associations which you have to backfill, which I think we found to be causing a lot of ingestion slowness. Because if you're saying like, oh, we're gonna attach something to this particular package name, then we have to go look at all the different versions of that package and then make that association to them as well.
Yeah.
And I think that was causing a lot of hot rows in the ingestion.
So, okay, I didn't do pretty good job today, but I don't want to hijack this meeting for just this discussion, but maybe if we can, set aside 15, 20 minutes here and there to talk about this, and let me know what do you think would be good for next week, and then I try to get some time to get more information about, what's the problem, how we are doing it with GUAC, how we are trying to do it in Trustify, and what makes sense in what use case. I think if we go step by step for everything like this, we would be able to figure things out where we are and where we want to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still finding this very interesting. Obviously, the more we can kind of get a bit more details on like why choosing a particular way over the other, because I think some of these trade-offs are similar trade-offs that we either realized we didn't make or we did make. We sort of said, hey, we're going to go this route instead of that route. And then it's useful to kind of see why did this work and not that work. I think it'll be super helpful for us. Because I mean, looking through some of this, these are some of the things that I know I want to make sure we can figure out in the future for GUAC, wherever, however this thing evolves. Again, like easier ways to just query for like the SBOMs, or easier ways to query for certain specific things, what would be useful.
Yeah, I like the product / advisory mapping story. I think that's a good one to start because I think it encompasses most of the hard problems that we've run into. Yeah.
Okay. And that's actually I'm something I'm working on it in the moment. So I can maybe prepare a couple of examples a couple of advisories that are problematic, in terms of not using pearls. And yeah, the database schema behind it and how this matching would work. Huh? Does that make sense for next Monday?
Sounds
Yeah,
good. to
sounds
me.
good.
Thanks for bearing
All right.
with me.
So thank you for sharing your thoughts. You know, it's always like it's a hard problem. Awesome.
All
We're
right.
at time.
Yep. Thank you guys. Bye.
Yeah.
One. Bye.